Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar on our award-winning OvrC platform. I'm Ricky Pishoff, and I'm one of the technical trainers here at SnapAV, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Before we get started, let's go through a few quick housekeeping items. First, we will be recording this presentation, and within 2 or 3 days, we'll send you a link via an email. So look for that if you want to share this with other employees within your company, or maybe you want to review it. You'll have a link where you can go to YouTube and view it whenever you'd like to. And lastly, we are planning to have a time at the end of the presentation for an open forum Q&A session. So please feel free throughout the presentation to send in your questions at any time. You can do that using the question and answer feature in the webinar control panel. We've got a couple of team members that are going to be answering questions as we go through the webinar, but we will be saving quite a few. We don't want to exceed our 60-minute time, but we will get all of your questions answered. Okay, now I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Chris Allen, who is the embedded team lead for the OvrC development group with SnapAV. Welcome, Chris, and I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Ricky, and thank you everyone for jumping on this pre-holiday webinar. We're going to be covering some more of the advanced topics, some more advanced features that OvrC can do. As Ricky mentioned, I head up our embedded team, so we manage and do the firmware for a whole bunch of upcoming and existing Snap products, primarily, as we'll be demonstrating today, the OvrC Pro Hub, which is basically what's going to enable all these features that you're going to see here today. Along with me, I also have Kenny Kim, who is the VP of Connected Products, and Kenny is going to be answering some of the questions that you guys post into the question section. But like I said, I really want to try to make this more of an open forum, especially right before everybody kind of goes on break, to just kind of get any questions out there. So I'm only going to be taking maybe 20 minutes or so here at the beginning to cover some of the main features. And then, like I said, we'll turn it over for more of a Q&A type of forum to kind of get your guys' feedback, pick your brain, and see what things you'd like to see for the new year. So without further ado, I'm just going to dive right in here. So as you can see, I'm sharing my screen. I'm logged in. You can see all the green OvrC Pro users here are listed, and we got our generic, our standard dashboard set up. So I'm going to click on devices, and that's going to give us our device list. By default, you can see I'm sorting by manufacturer, and one of the first integration protocols I'd like to cover is just Lutron. So if I scroll down to Lutron as the manufacturer here, you can see I have a radio raw repeater. Now, if I click on that, you also see the little icon here with the little globe with the green indicator. That indicates that additional protocol information is available. So you can see when I click in here to Lutron, I get some basic information about the processor, its time, date, latitude, longitude, sunrise, sunset, as well as the device list. So you can see here we've got which room location, what the device is named, what type of device it is, as well as its ID. Some very helpful information for troubleshooting. You know, maybe you've got a customer who's called and they're complaining because the outside sconces are coming on too early. Well, you could always hop into your Lutron processor, see when sunrise and sunset is actually triggering, and you know, if they say, well, you know, the lights aren't turning on, they're turning on too early at 7 o'clock, or turning off at 7 o'clock in the morning. Well, you can hop in here and see, well, that's because it's a sunrise event, and that's actually how it's programmed. It's just because that's what time sunrise is. So maybe you can hop into Lutron programming and, you know, run an adjustment that says 30 minutes after sunrise. Same thing if you need to send a tech out, but they don't have Lutron programming ability, but they need to integrate the Lutron radio route 2 system into Control 4 or Crestron. You know, you can basically take this list right here from OvrC with their IDs and directly integrate that into the processor, into Control 4, without them having to open Lutron software, pull out IDs, run an integration report, and, you know, pull up all that all the Excel details. So we give you a whole lot of information there. You have the ability at the bottom here to log in. By default, we do recommend that you create a telnet login specifically for OvrC. We default that to OvrC. So if you're ever going into a job and you're setting up Lutron, you want the hub to be able to get as much information out as it can. And obviously, as we add features, more additional information will be available. But we'd recommend setting up a username and password as OvrC for that. But if you do change it, you can obviously go in there and match what that might be. Now you also notice I have a connect option here, So if I click on that, it's going to give me a modal here that'll show me what ports I can connect to that processor on. One of those ports is actually Telnet. So if I click connect here, what that's doing is establishing a secure connection between my computer and OvrC's servers, and then between OvrC servers down to the hub, and then from the hub to the Radio Rod 2 processor. So that's an encrypted tunnel without you having to do a VPN or any sort of port forwarding, anything like that. So then I can simply log into the credentials for the OvrC hub. And as you can see here, I am given a command line prompt. Whoops, it helps if I spell that properly. And as you can see, I'm now logged into that Lutron processor. And again, perfect example for troubleshooting. The homeowner calls and says, you know, the outside recess lights on the porch aren't working. You can have them go over to that light switch or that keypad and push the button to turn those sconces or those recess lights on or off. And you'll actually see in the console here whether you get a response for whether that button was pressed or released. And if you get that response, then you know then more than likely the reason that the lights aren't turning on is because the bulbs are out. So, you know, they either need to replace the bulb or send somebody over to replace the bulb. It's just very helpful for real-time troubleshooting. Again, even if you need to call Lutron tech support and they need you to get in here and make some configuration changes, basically we give you that ability real time without you having to, you know, set up a VPN or do any sort of remote tunneling on your own. So that just about covers Lutron. Let me hop back here to my device list and jump into the next section, which is Control 4. So Control 4 is obviously a big one. We have an EA1 on the system here. Again, you can see it's got the little green dot, so I know I have some additional information I can pull out of that. So if I click on this, you know, what you see here is we actually get memory usage and CPU usage. That's from the Control 4 EA1. So I've got that data because the Control 4 system has SNMP enabled. I actually get port information. You can see, you know, what speed the main port is connected at, how much data has gone in and out. You know, even like Zigbee port information is kind of in here for you to be able to see how long the system has been up and running. And then we also have a Control 4 tab. So if I click on that, what that's going to do is it'll allow me to fill in the username and password, or I'll fill in the password here. I'll hit set, and then it's actually going to go out to that controller and pull in all that additional protocol information, like Zigbee, table information, basically all that. Now I also have a reboot option, which is a soft reboot, so I can click on that and it would reboot that processor, or I can click connect again, and you can see I have as you can see, I have a connect option here. And in this case, it's actually SSH. So if I click connect, it's going to go out, again, establish that tunnel connection to the processor through the hub securely. And I'll also note, too, that all the information on the Control 4 page that we showed there is gathered without you having to install a driver. So that's the great thing is literally all you have to do is plug in the hub. We've made it as plug and play as possible to where all you have to do is drop it on the network, provide power, and you should be off and running. So as you can see, I'm now logged into that controller. I can view its directory contents. Again, if I need to work with Control 4 tech support, they need me to log in remotely and delete a corrupted driver file off there. I can log in using the hub, navigate and do everything that they need me to do, restart services, you know, kill services, whatever the case may be, view, you know, see what's running. Basically, I can do that all through the hub with Control 4 tech support, again, without me having to do VPN or any sort of advanced networking setup. So again, that was Control 4, and that works on whether it's an HC series, EA series. It even works on the older touch panels. Basically, anything that we can log into and provide this additional information, we make that available to you without having to install a driver, without having to configure anything. Next, I'll move down to another control system, which would be Crestron. So if I come into Crestron, I've got an MP2E here, an older device, but again, you can see it's got the green dot. So when I click on this one, you'll see again a Crestron tab. So what we're doing is, again, without having to install or configure a module, basically we're pulling in processor information, the make, the model of the unit. We're even pulling in Simple Plus information, IP table information, which is always helpful. A lot of times, having to reset IP tables. This also works on Crestron touch panels because they're basically running the same software. So you can log into a touch panel and provide support on that and gather information on that. Again, kind of see whether it's DHCP, is it static, what's its IP address, is it showing up in the IP table list, etc. And then another really powerful feature that we have with this, as you can see, we have reboot, but we have connect in here too. And what I had previously done is I had set up this other port. And so what I have been demonstrating is standard port connections for, if you're familiar with OvrC, obviously 80 has been there for a long time. So you have the ability to connect to the secure HTTP or HTTPS port of the whatever the device may be. We recently had added Telnet and SSH. And in the most recent update, we basically added what we kind of considered an other or raw protocol. So you can actually go into the configuration for the site. So actually, let me show you where that's at first before I do that. If I go to site settings, and then I have network ports scanned. And as you can see, it's got a default list in here, but I've actually come in here and added the Crestron programming port 41795. And in this case, I've also added RDP, which is for remote desktop connection, which I'll demonstrate here shortly. RTSP, which is for camera streaming, and VNC, which is another remote application connection protocol for computers, whether they're running, Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever the case may be. So again, I'll touch base on that a little bit here shortly. But let me go back down. So I'll come in here to Crestron. So I'll click from the main device list, I can click connect again. Scroll back down until I find my programming port. I'll do connect here. And what that's going to do is it's actually going to create, again, a secure connection between the Crestron processor to the hub and the hub up to our servers. And then from there, what this is going to do is a little bit different. It's actually going to generate a link. And then I'm able to take this link. So in this case, it's webconnect.overc.com and then a port of 13750. I can copy that URL either way there. And then what I can do is I'm just going to grab my Crestron VT Pro E tools. I can come in here to do upload project. Say yes to compile that. I'm not actually going to upload it because this is for a touch panel and this is obviously a processor. But what you would do is you would come into here into your address book. Under the connection type, you would do TCP, and then under the IP address and host name, it would be webconnect. Let me just get rid of this port here. So this is where you'd paste the webconnect.overc.com, and then what you would do is you would put in the port, which I believe was, let me go back here, 13750. So if I do 13750, I would do OK. So as you can see, it's going to initialize that connection. So obviously this device does not support the capabilities because this is a, Vision Tools Pro software, and I don't actually have a touch panel on the rack here that I can demonstrate, but the process would be the same using the Crestron tools. Basically, again, what it's going to do is create a secure tunnel to any application that you have installed. You can paste this link into, and then it's going to have a secure connection between that application, even if it's a totally custom application on that port, to the actual, in this case, Crestron processor or whatever the device may be. So a perfect example I had mentioned earlier, we had left a computer in the rack. We need to access it remotely. Maybe it has a Lutron programming software on it, or it's got HAI software installed, something that you want to leave on site for remote programming, remote diagnostics. Basically, now you have the ability, without even having to do TeamViewer or AnyDesk or anything like that, you have the ability to remotely connect to that computer. So I have a Dell laptop here. Again, I'll come over and click the Web Connect option here, and you can see again, when the hub scanned this computer, it found that it had port 3389 open. And as I'd mentioned earlier, that is a remote desktop port. So that basically will allow you to connect remotely to a Windows computer. One caveat I will say is this only works on computers that are running Windows Professional. However, I'll show you a cool little trick here in a minute. Not a trick, but a kind of a workaround for that. So again, I'm going to copy this URL. I'm going to open my remote desktop connection software. And again, it gives me the option to connect to the computer. So all I have to do is paste in that link and hit connect. It's going to ask me for the login, which is, let me just double check what that was. I'm going to enter my credentials here. Again, this is an off-site computer that running Windows Professional that has remote desktop enabled. So it's going to go out and allow me to make a connection. And as you can see here, I basically have now logged into this other computer. So I'd mentioned this only works on Windows Professional. Well, there's another piece of software that's free licensing for both commercial and private use called VNC. And so I recommend a program called Tight VNC. So if you go to their website here, again, it's free for both commercial and personal and commercial usage. So you don't have to worry about your, team viewer in, and you only can be logged in for 5 minutes because you're using it on, 200 different computers. So all you would do is go to this website, click download now, run the installer, and basically on the computer you want to connect to, you would install the server piece, and then on the on your computer, the computer you want to connect from, you would install the same Tight VNC client, which basically, as you can see here, I have the client open. It has an option for remote host. So that's where I would simply paste in the link and the port to connect to that computer. Now, the nice thing with VNC is actually there's native support built into Linux and the Mac OS. So there's some very simple configuration options you can check off to allow remote connections. So my preference is actually to use VNC for everything, just because I know there's no licensing issues and you're kind of covered across all the platforms. So if you drop in a Linux box, maybe you don't want to spend the extra money on a Windows PC, well, you can do that. And then the great thing is, because for those Savant people that are out there, if you're using Savant Host Pro, because it is based on the Mac operating system, again, you could go into the Savant host, check off the option to allow remote connection via VNC, and then using this utility, you can log in remotely again from anywhere. So instead of it showing up as a Crestron processor in here, you would actually have a Savant host, and you would be able to click the connect option there, and it would show up, on port 5000. So again, just a very nice utility to kind of give you access to whether it's a remote computer, Savant system, whatever the case may be, even to help troubleshoot computer problems that, a client may be having that their printer can't connect. We all know we get those sorts of issues from our clients, no matter whether we're IT support for it or not. We're the de facto standard that they call. So that kind of covers remote connections. Another enhancement that we added was actually to add full capabilities for the Blue Bolt system. So if I come up here to, let's see, core brands, and I have a Panamax unit. So here, if I click on the Panamax unit, you can see again, we go out, and what we do is we'll pull in the model information, its firmware version, and then give you full control to reset or toggle on or off Panamax PDU outlets. So again, with no configuration other than dropping the OvrC Pro hub in, applying power and network, and then walking away. It's going to scan the network, find all this, and then give you that ability. I will say too, because the outlets are actually named in the Blue Bolt cloud, we're not able to pull in the outlet names. However, we are adding in an upcoming version of OvrC the ability for you to come in here and edit those names. So that is a feature we have had requested several times from dealers, and obviously since we listen to our dealers, that is something that will be coming in the future. All right, so that kind of covers Panamax. Obviously, I can also do connect to the web port if I need to, connect to Telnet and actually control it that way, or do additional troubleshooting. If I need to go in and change network settings via the HTTP web page, I can do that. Not a problem there. As I had mentioned before too, if I come under site settings, one of the additional ports I had added was 554, which is a standard port for RTSP, so camera streams. And so what I can do here is I have a FLIR camera, and if I click the FLIR camera, you can see, again, it gets more additional information. I actually get all the OnVIF information. Again, this is a super powerful protocol that we get a lot of data on. So you can see, you get stream URLs, network protocols, basically all the information you can about the camera, even its firmware version. And then I can actually connect again here. So if I hit connect and then hit open connection on this 554 port, because it knows that that port is open on that camera, I can actually live stream the view, the full resolution from that camera to my computer. So another great troubleshooting tip is, you can click this, send out maybe a low-level text, somebody that, they don't really know that much about setting up the cameras other than plugging it in and aiming it. That person could be out there, 2 stories up on a ladder, aiming the camera while you're back at your office with this remote connection. All you did was drop a hub in to give you remote access, and then you can use VLC or some other application to stream the full stream camera view to that, helping to aim the camera while you're completely remote without even having to be on site. So again, this kind of demonstrates the big capability we added in terms of the ability to connect to any port on any device, which really kind of opens it up. Instead of piecemeal 1, 2, adding ports here and there, we've basically given you the advanced option to connect to basically anything on any port. A couple other ones that we had added, I don't actually have it in this rack, but we have added support for PJ Link, which is a standard networking protocol for projectors. You're seeing this a lot more. It actually allows you to view lamp life, even to control the projector, to turn it on and off, see what input it is switched to. So if your client says, I'm trying to watch my Roku, but it's on the Fire TV, you could log in, click on the projector in this device list, and it would show you what input is actually on, and then help troubleshoot from there. We've also added support for Atlona matrix, HDMI matrices, and again, I don't have one of those in this rack, but basically that would again do the same thing, pull in information about that to view what its inputs and outputs are. Google Chromecast, we've got a lot of information on there. Basically anything that has the green icon next to it, you can see there's a whole lot of information in there. Even Roku, we actually have a bunch of information on Roku, Sonos as well. Sonos is kind of a big one. You can see we've actually got a reboot option here. Again, all the ability to do a soft reset without having to configure anything on Sonos, without having to configure anything on Roku. You kind of log in and get basic device information. Actually, in an upcoming update early next year as well, we're adding even more information. Currently, a lot of this data is read-only, but we've heard a lot of requests, people asking to control devices. So, for example, with Roku, we're going to actually give you the ability to view which apps are installed. And if the homeowner calls and says, I'm trying to watch on my Roku Netflix, but it's up on YouTube, you would actually be able to come in to that Roku, view the icon for YouTube, and click on that and have it switch on their TV. Again, as kind of some advanced troubleshooting steps there. So like I said, we really try to listen to what sort of feedback you guys have and, you know, take it into consideration and then roll it out in upcoming firmware releases. We're always making OvrC and the OvrC Pro Hub better based on your feedback. So I'm just looking here. That's about all I had to cover at a high level. So I'm going to go through with Kenny and just take a look here and see if there's some questions I can answer. Okay, so the first question was, is speed test a good way to monitor the health of the network? If not, what else should we use? So yes, that is a very, very good question. Obviously, if you look at the dashboard here, you can see we have speed test. Right now, speed test is the primary method in which we're using to kind of graph and monitor data points for that network. It is simply one metric that you can use to kind of diagnose what's going on with that particular environment, that house, that network. I would not say it's the de facto, like, oh, just look at your speed test and that'll tell you everything you need to know. That's actually a really good point, because we've heard a lot of feedback on that, and that's something we're working on enhancing. And again, the next upcoming versions of the hub and OvrC. Specifically, we're first and foremost, we've heard some issues around speed test accuracy, and so we're working on a couple things to help improve the accuracy, without burdening a whole lot of extra cost to maintain, very expensive servers and all that. So we're looking at a couple options there to make speed test better in itself, but then we're also working on some additional options. Actually, traceroute has been around for a very, very long time, and basically what that allows you to do is test the data points, how fast it is between your computer and your router, or and then your router to your ISP, and your ISP out to Netflix or out to Google, whatever the end service may be. So we're working on some things around there. Speed test is really kind of dependent on a whole bunch of different factors. How quickly can the server on the other side respond? Where is it geolocated? Our dealers in Hawaii trying to test against a speed test server in Atlanta is less than ideal and less than realistic too. So it also doesn't give you really any internal feedback on your network. How quickly am I connecting to my wireless access point? Like, that doesn't really give you any of that information. So no, speed test is not the best way to monitor the health of the network. So we're really working on some things coming up here in the next, I'd say 6 months to really give you the tools that you need to completely diagnose a network on the internal side as well as external. Next question here, is there a way to create a custom tunnel to the modem? Not currently. So if the modem is in bridge mode, basically all it's doing is it's going to hand off, a public IP address to the Arachnus or whatever the router may be. If you have, like a DirecTV or Comcast, or somebody has given you, a unit that you don't have in bridge mode, then what is going to happen is called basically double natting. So your ISP is giving a public IP address to that box. That box then gives an internal IP address to your Arachnus router, or whatever the router is that you're using. So the only way to access that through your router would actually be to take another hub and plug it into the router from your ISP. So unfortunately, we don't have a way with that to address that currently. But I will say that there is something coming up. I'm sure you guys saw the new routers we debuted at CEDIA, because we will have the OvrC Pro software running in the new Arachnus routers. And the router, basically what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to scan not only on the internal LAN side, but we'll be able to also scan the WAN side or the ISP side. So in that case, we will actually be able to connect to the modem. So if it was in bridge mode and it somehow dropped out of bridge mode because the ISP, did a firmware update, that will be addressed as those new Arachnus routers are released next year. Next question is, how long is the tunnel open for? It is open for, I believe, 30 minutes by default. So, we did that originally because we didn't want tunnels just left open for days on end for security purposes. It's just good practice to kind of close that. It's not permanently open currently. Again, this is some feedback that we have received, and we're actually looking at making it configurable per site. So basically, you'd be able to go in and say, or even when you connect, how long do you want this tunnel to be open for? So if you are doing Crestron programming, you could say, open this tunnel for 8 hours. That way I'm not going to have to, go into the hub every 30 minutes and click connect to get a new URL. So again, definitely a very good question. Some really good feedback there. Why is this remote connection method better than using a VPN? I wouldn't say that it's necessarily better than using a VPN. VPNs can be very tiresome, and there's a lot of work that can go into setting up a VPN. Even SSL VPNs you really have to have a whole lot of networking knowledge around it. And the thing with the VPN is they're typically open all the time. So the way this works is basically, obviously the tunnel's only open for 30 minutes, or when you close out the session, it'll actually close it out. So you don't have to worry that there's, anything that is being left open when you're done. Obviously, it's super simple to set up. There is no setup. You just click connect, and then we take care of the rest for you. VPNs, just in my past experience as well, I've seen a lot of latency issues with them as far as like drop packets, and it just tends to be kind of slow. Feel free to use VPN if you are using it. There's no reason you can't. It's just kind of a preference thing. Like I said, this is very simple to set up. We've also seen some people who've complained about PPTP VPNs. Those are easier to set up. They're not nearly as secure. So all the traffic that goes between our tunnel, between your device up to the OvrC cloud server, and then back down to the hub and to the device is all SSL encrypted, basically same level of encryption that you get with your bank. So it's about as secure as you can get. Let's see, another question here. My Control4 controller does not show the SSH remote connection. You shouldn't need to configure anything for the SSH remote connection. I would say to just rerun the scan and make sure when you go under site settings here, under the network ports scanned, just make sure that you have port 22 and SSH as the protocol. So if you have port 22, but you specify that it's an HTTP port or telnet port, it won't work. So you have to make sure that that's kind of matched up. So again, it's kind of an advanced feature. You just need to make sure that whatever port you specify, also the matching protocol applies to as well. The only other thing I could think of is that you could try using PuTTY or something, and if you can SSH into your controller from on the local network, just to make sure that SSH is actually open. It is open even on the new touch panels, but you have to have like a key in order to get into that. So there's certain devices, Control4 devices, that you might not be able to connect to. Like I said, a lot of the newer touch panels. But for the most part, any of the controllers you should be able to SSH into, unless that's been turned off somehow. Let me just look here and see if I missed any other major questions. Actually, looks like we got a whole bunch of flagged ones here. How do you scan for devices and VLANs? So again, here, if you go under site settings, you'll see network VLANs scanned is an option. In this case, this hub has not been set up to scan any VLANs, but you can scan up to 16 VLANs. So configuration of the hub is very important when it comes to VLAN. I should counter that. Configuration of the network switch or the router that the hub is plugged into is important. You need to make sure that the hub is plugged into a trunk port or a port that can see across all the VLANs. Obviously, if you've limited a port on a switch to only be able to see a specific VLAN, then the hub is never going to be able to see it. It's like doing any other VLAN configuration. Again, like if you've got cameras set up and you're hooking Control4 up and you want to make sure that Control4 can see that VLAN specifically so it can access the camera feeds, it would be no different with the hub. You would come into here, click add a VLAN, put in the corresponding VLAN ID, and then whatever the static IP is that you want to assign the hub on that VLAN. So if I've got, for example, 192.168.3.2 or 3.3, I need to make sure that's not going to conflict with the DHCP address range on that VLAN. So if I have the VLAN giving out DHCP address to all the other devices between 100 and 200, then I know if I do .3, I'm going to be safe. Again, as long as I don't have anything else in that particular range, I would enter whatever my subnet mask is and then hit save. And then what that hub is going to do is it's actually going to scan all the VLANs first and then populate them into the device list. Actually, if I pull up my development rack here, you can see I have an example of that. So we actually have multiple VLANs here. So you can see in this case, I actually have Radio Raw 2 on a separate VLAN. I've got a binary HMI matrix on a separate VLAN. So if I come down to this hub and click on Network VLAN Scan, you can see how I have that configured. And like I said, besides that, there's no additional configuration needed for VLANs, and you can scan across them, and you should be able to pick up all the information, all the devices that are on those VLANs. Do you have a document with these various ports available for these advanced features? I believe that's something that we had started to put together. I'll have to follow up with Kenny. I know we had started a document that kind of listed out what the most common ports were, what the Crestron port was, what the remote desktop port was, just to kind of get that out there. So that is something that we'll make available. Okay, Kenny actually just reminded here, if you look at the support tab on the OvrC Pro page, let me just see if I can find that, because obviously I've used that a lot. Kenny's at this one? The question? No? Oh, I'm sorry, on snapav.com. Yeah, it's under there. So we're making a bunch of documents available there, as well as on the blog too. What are some of the PJ Link features available? Like I said, I had mentioned PJ Link should give you the ability to view what inputs are available and which input it's switched to. Lamp life, lamp hours. You can see how much lamp life is left. Again, helpful if you know, okay, this lamp's got 1,400 hours on it and it's a life of 1,500 hours. It's probably close. I should potentially send somebody out to replace it. Firmware version, that kind of information. Next question, is there anything special that needs to be configured to gain access to Crestron and Control 4? No, I think I had answered that a little bit earlier. The great thing about Crestron and Control 4 with the implementation of the OvrC Pro Hub is you literally just need to plug it in and it takes it from there. Unless you were to change default username and passwords on the Control 4 or Crestron system for SSH or Telnet access, in which case you would need to update that in the system. Otherwise, you should be good to go with no configuration needed on those systems. Let's see, why does my hub always show slower ping and up and down speeds compared to my PC or mobile devices? Again, that was kind of going back to the speed test conversation. We've had a bunch of comments and feedback from dealers pertaining to speed test results. So that's something we've taken into consideration. And like I said, we're looking at a couple different options here coming up in the next firmware revision or two that should help alleviate some of the speed test results that we've been seeing. Kind of random all over the place values. What is the best way to have some redundancy to the network and the router to ensure it is always up? As far as making sure that the network is always up, one option obviously is a watt box. You could always put a watt box behind there to make sure that, if it does go down, basically you can have a watt box ping outside addresses like Google, as well as the router, and or an access point. And if something happens that it goes down, then it'll reboot that automatically. A lot of our routers have that capability built into as well as where it'll do network service detection, where it'll again try to access a particular site or URL that you're trying to get to, and if it can't get to that, after so many tries, it'll know that the network's probably down, so it'll try to reboot itself or do a release and renew if it's got a cable modem attached to it. So there's a bunch of options you can kind of do there. If you're looking to make sure that your ISP doesn't go down, our routers support dual WAN. So we've had a number of clients that will pull in one Comcast into one port, and they'll pull Time Warner or another ISP into another port. So that way, if one one internet connection goes down, basically you always have a backup. And then, you basically not necessarily double your speed, but basically you also by that, give yourself more network bandwidth to be able to do things with. Let's see here. I saw another one come in. How many Pro Hubs do I need at one location? Basically, you just need one per location. Like I said, the only exception right now is if you do have a modem and you want to be able to monitor that modem, you would have to put a hub behind that. But otherwise, it's just one Pro Hub per location. If you got VLANs or whatever, there's no limit. We don't charge based on the number of devices on the network or how many speed tests you run. It's all just kind of basically one per site. What is the best practice for where the hub gets connected? We usually tell best practice is to connect the hub to like a managed network switch, to plug it in behind or a smart switch. But honestly, I mean, based on what I've kind of seen, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's going to scan the entire network. It doesn't matter where it is in the network. So again, best practice, put it behind a managed switch just so you've got additional control there. But in realistic terms, it doesn't really matter where you put it in terms of the network topology. Let's see here. Let me scroll back up. I had a bunch of other ones I didn't quite get to. Let me just see. Is there a way to view Luma cameras through the OvrC browser? So that would be using that RTSP method that I had mentioned. So if I go under devices here, and then let me see if I even have a SnapAV Luma. Yeah, so I've actually got a Luma NVR here. So if I click on that, that's actually going to web connect me to it. We'd have to list. You could list other port on that, and then the hub should scan that, and then that should show up, just like I had done with the other camera. What reports do you offer for clients? What about reports for us as dealers, such as IP address, location, report, devices, etc.? Kenny, do you want to talk about reports a little bit, maybe?
Hey guys, reporting is something we are actually working on. There's actually a lot of data in OvrC. We have a ton of data around devices activities, also how it interacts with the cloud, as well as the user interactions. So we're actually combining all that data right now into a format where you guys could peer through it and then actually generate ad hoc or automated reports, which then you can use a piece of that for your clients. So that's actually a pretty big effort that we're working on. So we'll introduce that probably within the late first half of next year, if not early second half. So that's a big effort, but we want to make sure we get you the right information that's actually valuable to you. Thanks.
I had another question here. Is there any way to see who might be on the network before doing a firmware update remotely? So I'm assuming that's basically asking, before you do a firmware update on a router, just to kind of see, is there some way to know whether, there's heavy traffic at that point? Maybe, everybody's on doing Netflix, and so obviously you don't really want to, kick off a router firmware update if everybody's on there, using the internet. Unfortunately, there's no really good way. I mean, we do get with the access points. If you go to the dashboard and scroll down to the bottom, you can see we actually get the TX and RX data. So you could refresh that to kind of see, how much data is flowing through the access point. But that's not really going to help you in terms of seeing how much traffic is going through the router. Actually, that's a new feature we have on the new routers, is the ability to see more or less like real-time bandwidth usage. So you can see which clients are streaming and which are accessing the internet and how much data are they using. So again, with those new routers, that you would be able to tell that, but currently there's no, unfortunately, there's no really good way to do that. We're also looking at adding a feature to be able to do batch upgrades for a site on a schedule. So, you know, you could schedule a firmware update to the router at 3 o'clock in the morning without you having to set an alarm and wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's another feature that we're looking at adding in an upcoming version as well. Again, there's another question here about best practices and using the OvrC hub and to remote into job sites and use Windows-based programming for RTI, Lutron, etc., without having to set up a remote PC on site. So that's actually one thing we had kind of toyed with, was the ability to maybe try to leverage the hub software to run on a higher speed computer, so that way it could, you know, basically run RTI and Lutron and other software, HAI, whatever the case may be, without having to leave a PC on site. We currently don't have any plans for that, just because the increased costs, and you know, there's a lot of complexity about managing Windows computers. So that's something that we have thought about, but like I said, currently we don't really have anything in the roadmap to manage that. Let's see, we have a site with over 200 cameras. Let's see, we'll get a notification that a switch and has connected, but we don't get a disconnected notification. Or we'll get an offline notification, but then check in and everything appears to be okay. They said it would be fixed with a firmware update. Is this still in the works? I'm not sure about that exact that exact case. All I can say is maybe to contact tech support or help@OvrC.com, and then we can look into that specific issue to see if there's maybe some reason that notifications are getting missed, or you know, something's not getting triggered when it should be. So that's a case by case basis, something we'll kind of have to take a look at. So let's see. On an existing site, I have a Cisco access point, HP switches, and HP switches. Can I control them with a Pro Hub? So I'd say yes, kind of. Basically, the hub, if you drop a hub in, it's going to scan and see that Cisco access point. It's going to find all the HP switches. It's going to find that it'll give you remote access to the UIs of those devices. So you would be able to go into your device list here. Actually, I believe I have one here. Let me see if it's, let's see. I don't have that one, but I do have a switch as an example. Let me just see if I come into, again, this is on my development rack here, but I have a Cisco SG250 10P. So I can click on that, and what it's going to do is it's going to give me, obviously it's a Cisco switch. It's going to give me all the SNMP information. It's going to show me the ports, whether they have something plugged into them, you know, what the port speed is, how much data has gone in and out. This is all dependent on the switch model, however. We don't get this exact information for everything. It all depends on how closely they've adhered to the SNMP protocol. So I can view all that information, and in an upcoming release, if this is, you know, this is a PoE switch, so one of the features we're working on for the next firmware release is actually the ability to control these ports, not just view them, but say you've got a camera on port 2, you want to reboot that PoE camera, you know, we're going to via SNMP give you the ability to click a reset button or power that outlet on and off, even for non-Snap AV hardware. So again, we're targeting like 4 or 5 of the top most used network switches that we've seen out there, and kind of go from there. But like I said, additional control is coming. But for the time being, what you can do is you can always click connect, and then either, you know, log in, telnet, SSH, and control that switch, or obviously connect to the local UI also of that switch. So if I actually do connect here, that should open a remote tunnel connection, and then in the window, I'm actually going to get the local UI of that Cisco switch. So yes, even for third-party products, you can connect and remotely manage them. Obviously, if it's an Arachnus switch, you're going to get a much higher level of control, more granularity, you know, and ease of access. So that's that question. What about for Sonos to toggle commands to turn Wi-Fi off and have it persist? We've had some dealers inquire about being able to do Sonos Wi-Fi, and as far as turning off that's something that we've looked into, and we have it on the roadmap now. It's just a question of when we can fit that in. So that should be possible. It's just a matter of when, and I'm not sure on when that would be releasing just yet. Are there settings that need to be turned on to get Crestron SMTP working? I'm assuming you mean SNMP. SMTP was for like email, basically an email server, email notifications. But for SNMP, I don't believe that there's anything that should need to get turned on for that to work. If you have a Crestron processor or touch panel that is not showing SNMP data, again, please contact help at OvrC.com, and then somebody on our team can hopefully dive in and take a look at that and see what might be going on. We have, we only have so many models of Crestron hardware here, so we've tested with what we have here and some dealer feedback, but obviously the more realistic installation hardware we can see, the better. Let me see. Any new feature? Are there any features for the Arachnus switches that we should be using in regards to PoE, etc.? Nothing particular kind of comes to mind. I mean, obviously with the Arachnus switches, you're going to get a whole bunch more detail in here. So let me switch back over. I think I actually have one in here. Yeah. So if I click on this one, you'll see you get a much more native view. So with the Arachnus hardware, you get power utilization. You can see how long the unit's been up, and you get very, very detailed port information. So you can actually go in and label ports. So that way, if I know I need to reboot the Xbox PoE port, I can do that. You can see it's got a little icon here to indicate whether it's actually drawing PoE power, and I can see it's actually drawing 4.4 watts on port 10. Versus port 11, which has something plugged in at a gigabit speed. However, it's not using PoE. So, if you're trying to find, oh man, which one of these cameras is, or which port has got a camera plugged into it, that kind of helps with that. And then obviously a big part of it is the ability to go in to do configure, and you can actually go in and manage port settings on the Arachnus unit. You can even do things like allocating how much wattage that particular PoE port should draw, kind of limit it there. You can set IP settings and time settings, and then the cool thing is you can actually go in under the activities tab and see what's happened, like who has cycled PoE power on that particular port. So you get a very granular detail about that particular unit. So again, that's really the biggest advantage of using the Arachnus and just the Snap AV branded products is they integrate with OvrC in the platform in a much higher level than the hub can do. Let's see here. With a Pro Hub, will I be able to show a customer when he loses internet coming into the house? You would actually, so I mean, if the hub loses its connection to the internet, you're actually going to get, let me go back to the site here. You're actually going to get notifications. So at the top here, you'd be able to see, I don't have any, for this demo account, I don't have any enabled, but basically you would be able to get a real-time log to see like when the internet has gone down, like if the router has gone down or the hub has gone down and loses its internet access. All that information you're going to be able to view just using, like you said, if the only thing you have on that site is a Pro Hub, then yes, that's going to be able to give you that level of information to the homeowner. And then, like I said, with the dashboard, you'll be able to see here as well, kind of speed test history to see, if there's major drops or when things have been offline. Let's see, we have a question here. It says, I have a job site has 32 TVs as video displays and Sonos as audio. I've heard that you should create a separate VLAN for the Sonos equipment. Is that true? That is definitely outside my wheelhouse. I am not sure if you would need to create another VLAN for the Sonos equipment. Unfortunately, I'm not a Sonos expert, so I would suggest taking a look at the Autonomic brand. Our Autonomic line is actually, we've had a whole lot of good improvements there recently, and I honestly would just recommend taking a look at that if you haven't had a chance to look at Autonomic as an alternative to Sonos. It's definitely a viable option there, but unfortunately, because I'm not sure as far as a VLAN for the Sonos equipment, I do know with Autonomic there's definitely no need for that, so I'm not sure why someone would recommend that, but like I said, it's unfortunately outside my area of expertise. Let's see, I think we have time for maybe one more question. Let me just scroll up and see if there's any other major ones that I missed. That looks like that's the bulk of the questions. If you do have any other questions that I haven't covered here, please feel free to, as you can see on my screen here, if you go into the upper right, you can click the question mark option, and then that'll open up a modal where you can either submit a feature request or request service and support. Feature requests, obviously, we're very open to, the feedback from you as dealers, since you are the ones that are out there installing it. So if there's anything that's major that you'd like to see that's missing, even if it's like, hey, I'd love to see support for this HP Pro Curve switch, we'd love to get that feedback. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Ricky to kind of wrap us up.
Okay, Chris, as always, there's tons and tons of great information about the OvrC products and where it's going and where the platform's going. Guys, we try to do an OvrC feature upgrade and demonstration at least, if not once a month, if not every other month. But we do have a good log of these webinars that shows the progression of the feature set. So if you would like to see some of our past webinars, just drop an email to webinars@snapav.com. And I'll be happy to forward you a little list of some recorded webinars. And also, the OvrC team has a very, very good blog with lots of videos and lots of documentation that they share with the OvrC community. Well, again, that's all we have time for today. We like to keep these right at 1 hour or less. So please look out for a follow-up email that will come from us with a link to today's recorded session. You could share that with other employees if you'd like to, or look it over again if you missed some of the technical data that we talked about. Also, please take just a moment to fill out the brief survey when you exit the webinar. We do listen to those comments, and we do schedule future webinars based upon what you would like to see. So please take a moment or two to fill that out. On behalf of Chris and Kenny and the whole OvrC team and SnapAV, I want to thank you for taking time to join us today. Have a great day, guys, and happy installing.